When I woke up, the world no longer looked familiar. The overhead lights burned into my eyes like I was being examined or prepared for autopsy. Darkness wasn't the absence of light, it was the presence of fear, of silence that screamed, of stillness that hunted. I remember waking up gasping like I'd just breached the surface of deep water. The air was sharp and chemical. My throat was dry, my chest heavy. Something tight pressed against my wrists and ankles. I couldn't move. Then the light came. A white, sterile glare exploded behind my eyelids, forcing them shut again. I winced. My head throbbed. My ears rang. Where was I? I blinked. The ceiling above me was pale gray with panels of surgical lights, those big, cold discs you see on hospital shows. Only this wasn't a hospital. Hospitals didn't usually feel like cages. And hospitals didn't usually have leather straps pinning your limbs to a metal slab. My arms were splayed, my legs immobile. I was tied down. Panic flooded in. I pulled hard against the restraints and the sound of buckles straining filled the room. My breathing quickened, my heartbeat thudded in my ears like a war drum. Think, breathe, focus. I looked around, or tried to. My neck could only turn a little. The walls were clean, metallic. There were cabinets, machines, monitors, nothing labeled, nothing familiar. No windows, no clock, no noise, except for a low humming sound and my own ragged breath. Then a voice, mechanical, flat, female. Vitals stable, BP 92/60. Core temperature 97.1. Cardiac rhythm normal. The voice came from somewhere above and to the right, like a speaker tucked into the wall. I wasn't alone. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick. My mouth wouldn't form words. Only a weak, hoarse noise came out. Where? That was all I could manage. Footsteps. Behind the wall. Maybe on the other side of a door. Slow, deliberate. One set, then two. They were coming. I jerked harder. The restraints didn't budge. One of the wrist cuffs dug into my skin until I felt something wet. Blood, maybe. The door hissed open. A rectangle of harsh fluorescent light bled into the room. Two figures entered. Both wore pale surgical scrubs, masks, caps. Their faces hidden, their eyes empty. One of them held a clipboard, the other pushed a tray. Metal tools clinked. A scalpel. Forceps. A bone saw. The tray rolled to the foot of the table. One of them reached for my leg, adjusting the strap. That was when I screamed. The sound ripped out of me, raw and animal. It startled them for half a second. The one with the clipboard dropped it. She's awake. That was a man's voice, clipped, irritated. She shouldn't be. Neuromuscular blocker must have worn off, the other said. We need to sedate. I thrashed, trying to arch off the table, but the straps held me down. My scream turned into a sob. Please, don't. Where am I? They ignored me. The one on the right pulled a syringe from the tray. The needle was long. He moved toward my arm. I twisted my wrist, trying to make it hard for him, but he caught it easily and pressed the tip of the needle into a vein. I felt the cold burn of the fluid before I even saw him depress the plunger. And then, nothing. Dark again. But not the same dark. This one had voices, whispers, echoes of something I once knew. Aria. That name again, it floated through my mind like a string drifting in the dark. Aria Reyes. I saw flashes, rain on glass, hands reaching, a woman crying, a child laughing, then nothing again. When I opened my eyes the second time, it wasn't light that greeted me, but absence. The room was dim, the overhead lamps were off. I was still strapped down, but something had changed. The air smelled like bleach and metal. I could hear soft beeping from the monitors. My skin was damp with sweat, my arm ached where they had injected me. But my head was clearer. Aria Reyes. Was that my name? I looked down and saw a band on my wrist, a white plastic medical bracelet like the ones from hospitals. Aria Reyes, ID 230-87-011. Blood type, O positive. I didn't recognize the number, but the name. It stirred something inside me, a flicker, a shape in the fog. My name is Aria. I am Aria. But who is Aria? I closed my eyes and tried to pull pieces from the void. There were no parents, no birthdays, no friends, just scraps. Screeching tires, glass, sirens, blood, so much blood. And then, darkness. What had happened to me? Why was I here? I had to get out. That thought was sharp, real, the only thing that made sense. I turned my head. One of the machines had wires leading to a heart rate monitor. My pulse blinked on screen. The beeping matched it. I focused on slowing it down. Breathe. In, out. If they came back, I had to be ready. I began testing the restraints. My right wrist, too tight, left, looser. I twisted slowly, over and over. Skin burned, metal scraped, but eventually, I felt the buckle give a little. My hand slipped free. I didn't waste time. I reached across, yanked the other buckle open, sat up. The rush of motion made my head swim. The room tilted. I steadied myself and unstrapped my legs. My knees were weak, but they worked. I stood. For the first time, I saw myself. There was a long mirror on the far wall. Not decorative, more like observation glass. I was wearing a surgical gown, pale blue, thin. My arms were bruised. There were marks on my chest, drawn in marker. Dotted lines. Prepped for surgery. I stepped closer to the mirror. My face looked familiar and strange. Brown eyes, messy dark hair, scratches on my cheek. I touched them gently. Then, I heard it again. Footsteps. I ducked behind the tray. There was no weapon, only surgical tools. My fingers closed around the scalpel. The door hissed open. I didn't hesitate. I sprang forward, slashing out. The man shouted, dropped the tablet he was holding, and stumbled back. I didn't see blood, just surprise. He wasn't one of the surgeons from earlier. He wore a security uniform. And now he was yelling into his radio. "Patient 39 is loose. She's armed." I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. The hallway outside was blinding. I kept the scalpel low, my breath ragged. Doors lined both sides, metal, labeled only with numbers. 37, 38, 40. I was 39. I passed a window and saw another room like mine. Another person. Unconscious. Strapped down. Oh God. This wasn't just about me. This was a facility. A harvesting center. And I was just the next scheduled surgery. I kept running. An alarm blared. Red lights strobed. Footsteps behind me. Voices shouted. "Cut her off! She's in corridor C!" I turned a corner and found a stairwell. I took it 2 steps at a time. My bare feet slapped against the concrete. On the next level, I found another hallway. This one quieter, darker, cooler. I paused at a door and tried the handle. Unlocked. I slipped inside. Storage. There were boxes, cabinets, a locker. I rifled through drawers until I found scrubs. Too big, but they'd do. I pulled them on over the gown. Found a pair of hospital shoes, no laces. Then something better. An ID badge, clipped to a lanyard. Dr. L. Jensen, Surgical Department. The face didn't match mine, but the chip might help me through doors. I took it and ran. I didn't stop until I reached what looked like an exit corridor. A metal security door stood at the end, glowing green. I swiped the badge. Access denied. I tried again. Still denied. From behind me, I heard voices. They were close. Desperate, I slammed the badge against the panel one last time. Nothing. Then a voice over the intercom. A man. Cold. Clinical. Patient 39, Aria Reyes, you've made it far, but the protocol remains. I turned slowly. On the monitor nearby, his face appeared. Middle-aged, glasses, white coat. You were never meant to wake up, and this is a mistake we intend to correct. I backed away. No one agreed to this, I shouted. He smiled faintly. Actually, you did. You just don't remember. Then the monitor flickered off. The lights dimmed, and the last thing I heard, a voice behind the door. Prepare for organ retrieval. The patient is awake. When I heard the man's voice say, prepare for organ retrieval, the patient is awake, I knew I didn't have time. Only one choice, run or die with my heart still beating. They called me Patient 39, a number, sterile and cold. It was stitched into the tag dangling from the metal rail of my cot. I stared at it, blinked once, then again, as if the digits might realign into something human, something familiar. But all I saw was the same lifeless code, P039, female, donor ready. Donor? The word made my skin prickle. I wasn't a donor. I hadn't signed anything. Had I? Panic stirred in the pit of my stomach again, clawing up like bile. I pressed my palm against the cold wall beside the bed, grounding myself. My breathing was shallow, but controlled now. At least I was no longer strapped down. My escape, if you could call it that, was still fresh in my bones. My muscles ached, but they worked. My head throbbed, but it processed. I was functioning. I was alive. Barely. The room they'd tossed me in was smaller than the surgical room. No surgical lights, no steel tables. It looked like a recovery cell. Gray walls, a single security camera blinking red in the corner, a sink with a cracked mirror above it. Someone had bandaged my wrist, probably to cover the needle mark, or maybe to disguise something more. I stumbled over to the sink, my legs like jelly, and turned the faucet on. No water. Of course not. But the mirror. I needed to see. What did I look like? The reflection that stared back was not a stranger, but not someone I recognized either. Late 20s, maybe? Pale skin, disheveled dark hair sticking to the sides of my face like ivy after rain. Blood had dried along the hairline, flaking as I moved. Eyes wide, alert. Brown, no hazel under the flickering light. Haunted. There were bruises on my collarbone and wrists. Surgical tape marked the crease of my left elbow, and there, taped under my wristband, was a thin plastic tag. I peeled it away with trembling fingers. Name, Aria Reyes. Age, 29. Patient ID, Ray 672391B. Status, organs cleared. Priority donor. Area. The name rang like a distant bell, low and melancholy. It didn't feel foreign, but it didn't quite fit either, like trying on clothes you once loved but had outgrown. Still, it was something. A name. A clue. Area, I whispered aloud, testing it. The sound shivered in the room. I'm Area. No response. Just the low hum of the overhead light and the whir of ventilation. But saying it made it real. Something in me softened until I caught the next line again. Priority donor. Who had made that decision? I didn't remember checking any box. I didn't remember being sick. I didn't remember anything until... Sudden flash. Headlights. Rain. Screeching tires. Then darkness. A memory? Or was it just noise? I clutched the sink to steady myself, heart thudding. Another flash. Red ambulance lights, metal scraping on asphalt. someone shouting my name through the downpour. It echoed, collided with the memory of the surgeon's voice from earlier. She's conscious, prep for extraction. They had my body, now they wanted my mind to shut up and let them take the rest. I dropped to the floor, curling my knees to my chest. Who had brought me here? And why? I wasn't alone in this place. I was sure of that. Even after the initial escape, ripping out the IV, hiding under gurneys, evading silent halls, I had felt them. Others. Movement behind walls. Whispers in the vents. Maybe more patience, maybe not. I couldn't decide which thought terrified me more. There was a single door in the room, no handle on my side, just a small food hatch bolted shut. I crawled toward it and tapped. No answer. I knocked harder. Hello? My voice cracked. Is anyone there? Silence. Then footsteps. I backed up quickly. Someone was approaching. The hatch slid open with a metallic clunk. A tray was shoved through, plastic bowl, white rice, something yellow that smelled like synthetic lemon, water bottles sealed with a green cap. The hand that delivered it wore a glove. I tried to look through the slot, but the person was already gone. No words, no face, no explanation. Prison. This wasn't a hospital. This was a slaughterhouse. Hours passed, maybe days. Time stretched like taffy. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard it again. Prepare for organ removal. Like a horror film, I couldn't pause. I began searching the room more thoroughly. I found a loose tile behind the bed frame, and beneath it, a crumpled sheet of paper, scribbled in shaky handwriting. If you can read this, you still have time. They erase your memory with drip 9. Check your scars. Look for room 7. That's where it started for me. M. Who was M? More importantly, drip 9? Memory erasure. I pulled up my sleeve again. That bandage. I peeled it back slowly. A small puncture wound. Healing. Almost hidden. Not from surgery, from something injected. My stomach flipped. How many memories had they taken? Who had I been before? And why did that matter now? The next time the food slot opened, I tried something different. I whispered, I know who I am. Silence. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, a voice, low and male, filtered through. That's too bad. Why? Because you weren't supposed to. Who am I to you? You're a product, he said, and slid the hatch shut. I sat frozen for minutes, staring at the tray I hadn't touched. Product. They didn't see me as a person. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. But I saw me, and I was starting to remember. The dreams came next. Not quite memories, but not random either. A girl laughing beside me, blonde hair, dimples, maybe a sister. A hand holding mine in a hospital bed, whispering something in Spanish. The weight of guilt. Thick. Heavy. I'd made a choice. A hard one. And I was here because of it. I woke up one night, if it was night, sweating, heart hammering. The dream had shown me blood. My blood. A signature. A document. I signed something. Voluntarily. Not exactly this, but I stumbled back to the mirror, heart racing. Why? I asked the reflection. And this time, it almost felt like the girl staring back whispered, to save her. The name Aria Reyes was real. Mine. But I had no idea who she was, or why I would ever sign away my own life. All I knew now was that someone had taken what little I had left and twisted it. My identity, my consent, my memories, all harvested like my organs were supposed to be. I didn't come here on my own. Someone had brought me, and they wanted to make sure I never left. In this world, everything has a price, even heartbeats that haven't stopped yet. I just never thought I'd be the most expensive item in a blood-soaked transaction. I didn't know how I got from the operating table to this narrow corridor, only that pain drove me like a hound chasing its prey. My feet were bare, cold against the tile, and every step felt like walking on shattered glass. The gown I wore was damp with sweat and something darker, something red. I didn't look down to check. Alarms hadn't gone off. No one was chasing me yet. I didn't understand why. I moved blindly, guided only by darkness and the adrenaline boiling in my veins. Each shadow could have been a person, each creak in the walls a footstep. Eventually, I found a door slightly ajar, marked with a faded sign, Sterile Storage B. I pushed it open and slipped inside. The air was cooler, smelling faintly of rubbing alcohol and old metal. Cabinets lined the walls, filled with surgical instruments, IV fluids, boxes of gloves, vials, sealed syringes. This wasn't meant for patients to see. I collapsed behind a metal shelf, gasping, trying not to sob too loud. Blood rushed in my ears, but underneath it, I heard voices. At first they were muffled, distorted, like a dream half remembered. I crouched lower, inching closer to the narrow slit in the door. Two men stood just outside, their profiles barely visible under the hallway's dim fluorescent lights. One wore a lab coat, the other a tailored charcoal suit. The buyer and the butcher. "Are you prepped for transport?" the suited man asked, calm and precise, like he was ordering wine. "Vitals are stable, no signs of infection," said the doctor, scrolling on a tablet. "We've maintained optimal perfusion. Her organs are clean, untouched." My stomach flipped. "I want confirmation," the man continued. "You promised me the heart would be viable, not just technically, but perfect." The doctor didn't hesitate. "It's pristine, young, strong. No history of disease, no medication residue, no psychological irregularities that affect cardiovascular rhythms." The man gave a short laugh. "Psychological irregularities?" "Stress, anxiety, anything that alters hormonal balance. All of it leaves chemical signatures in tissue. But hers..." The doctor paused, smiling faintly. "She's a blank slate." The words hit me like a punch. I bit my lip until it bled. "I've wired the full amount," the suited man said. "My associate confirmed it was received." "Confirmed," the doctor nodded. "Your client will have the transplant within 24 hours." The man turned slightly, and for a split second I saw his face. Clean-shaven, angular, expensive skin. Not young, not old, just powerful. "Make sure she doesn't wake up again," he said. "I don't like surprises." The doctor leaned in. "Technically, she already has. Momentarily. Probably residual neural activity. We increased the sedative dose." "Not good enough," the buyer snapped. "I don't care if she flinches. I paid for silence." "You'll have it." Silence followed. And then I did the one thing I shouldn't have. I shifted my weight and knocked over something, an empty glass vial. It clattered against the floor like a gunshot. They stopped talking. Footsteps approached. I clamped my mouth over my mouth, praying the darkness would swallow me whole. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they'd hear it through the walls. "Did you hear that?" the doctor asked. "Storage room," the man said flatly. He reached for the door. I scrambled backward, wedging myself between two oxygen tanks. I grabbed a scalpel from the nearest tray, gripping it with trembling hands. They didn't come in. "I'll have security sweep the area," the doctor said, voice suddenly louder as if performing for someone watching. "No need. Just make sure the heart's still beating," the man replied, and his footsteps faded down the corridor. The doctor lingered, then left. I waited in silence for what felt like an hour. When I finally exhaled, my body shook with the force of held fear. Later, when the facility grew quieter, I crept toward the door, peering through the slit. Empty. I stepped into the hallway. My knees nearly buckled, but I moved. No alarms. Still, why? Maybe they didn't want chaos. Maybe secrecy mattered more than capture. Or maybe they were watching me anyway, letting me run so they could harvest fear along with flesh. I turned left and found another corridor, this one marked restricted in stenciled red. I had nothing to lose. Behind the second door was a control room. Monitors lined the walls, some showing vitals, other surveillance footage. One screen showed the very hallway I just escaped from. Another, a hospital bed. A man lay in it, pale, sunken eyes, ventilator tubes curling from his nose like plastic vines. His chest barely rose. Patient ID number A001. Name, confidential. Status, pre-op. Heart transplant pending. It wasn't a sick child or a woman with a failing heart. It was him, the billionaire. The buyer wasn't buying for someone else. He was buying for himself. I found the patient chart file drawer tucked beneath the central desk. Patient 39, Area Reyes. I flipped open the file, notes, medical history, blood type, sedation logs, dates. Requested by Aegis Private Biomedical Holdings. Delivery date, 17 hours post-anesthesia. Procurement type, living organ retrieval. I blinked at that term. I'd never heard it before. The last page was a signature form. The bottom read, donor consent, Area Reyes. And beneath that, my own signature, or something that looked like it. I stared at the jagged scrawl, cold sweat running down my back. I didn't remember signing anything. Did I? Was I coerced? Drugged? Was it forged? There were too many questions and not enough answers. But one thing was clear. Someone wanted my heart so badly they paid to rip it out of me. Not metaphorically, literally. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually I moved again. I had to. I couldn't afford stillness, not when time was measured in heartbeats. I took one last look at the screen, with the billionaire's face. He didn't look like a monster, just a man desperately clinging to life. I wondered if he ever thought about the cost, not the money, but the life on the other side of the knife. I kept moving, floor after floor, deeper into the guts of the facility. No exits, no elevators that worked without clearance, every door locked by biometric access. I was in a fortress, a sterile tomb. My body a time bomb with a price tag. I needed to disappear again, but this time on my terms. I found a dark utility room and curled into the corner behind a rolling laundry bin. The adrenaline had drained. Nausea took its place. I counted breaths to calm myself. 10 in, 10 out. In somewhere down the hall, I heard a voice. Boss just called. The plane's on standby. They'll prep the transplant as soon as they sedate her again. Another voice replied. Prep team's ready. The donor is still loose, but the building is sealed. They'll find her. I stopped counting. I wasn't a person to them. I was the donor. Time passed. Meaningless. I began to lose track of what was real and what wasn't. I dreamed of a younger me, laughing, maybe in a car, someone next to me, a blur, a scream, lights. It faded before I could hold on to it, but the feeling stayed, that I hadn't come here willingly, that I hadn't walked into this trap. I was led. I was chosen. A sharp knock echoed from somewhere above. Voices. Security sweep complete? Good. Bring her up. The buyer wants the heart before morning. My blood ran cold. Bring her up? They thought they had me. They thought I was caught. I crept back into the hallway, found a maintenance shaft left unlocked. It was narrow and filthy, but it led downward, away. And that was all I needed. As I crawled through the tight metal passage, a voice rang in my mind. Not a memory, something I'd heard just hours ago. Her heart is perfect. perfect. Because it still beat, because it still hoped, and someone had paid for that hope to be extinguished. I stopped crawling and pressed my forehead to the cold steel. I wasn't a hero. I was scared, alone, but I was still alive. And as long as that was true, they couldn't have me. Not yet, not without a fight. As I found another access panel and slipped out into the darkened lower level, I heard the intercom above crackle, a male voice, cold and clinical. Order confirmed, surgery scheduled, buyer en route. They were ready. They had everything in place, except me. I used to think escaping that room meant survival, but when I opened the first door, I stepped into a living graveyard. The hallway was drenched in shadows, lit only by a flickering red emergency bulb overhead. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to keep moving. Every step forward felt like a choice between freedom and death. My bare feet pressed against the cold linoleum, sticky in places, wet in others. My heart hadn't stopped pounding since I'd heard the words, "Prepare for heart extraction. The patient is awake." My body was still weak, still trembling from the drugs they'd pumped into me, but adrenaline was carrying me now. My hospital gown flapped lightly as I moved, one hand pressed to my chest as if protecting the heart someone had tried to steal. I didn't know how long I wandered the labyrinth of corridors. There were no signs, no exit maps, just sealed metal doors and surveillance cameras I prayed were dead. Once I heard footsteps and ducked into a supply closet filled with cleaning fluid and rusted mops. I held my breath while a pair of shoes clicked past, slow and deliberate, like they were savoring the hunt. When the footsteps faded, I crept out again. Eventually, I found a stairwell. The door creaked as I opened it, every sound amplified in the silence. I hesitated at the top step. Down was risk, but up? If the billionaire patient was hidden in the upper floors, that meant staff, guards, perhaps even the operating room I'd escaped from. So I went down. The further I descended, the colder it got. The stairs turned concrete after the second flight, the air grew damp, and the walls began to sweat. I reached the bottom floor, found another door, and pushed it open into complete blackness. I fumbled forward, one hand trailing the wall, until I found a switch. With a hesitant flick, the overhead fluorescents sputtered and blinked alive. That's when I saw them. Rows. Dozens of them. Beds lined up in an open chamber, each holding a body. People. They were all motionless, their faces pale, mouths parted slightly as if trapped mid-sigh. Each patient had a medical bracelet like mine, some with IV lines still attached, some with electrodes on their temples. Their chests rose and fell, alive but unconscious. Above each bed was a clipboard with a number and a status. Patient number 21, kidney, LR, pending. Patient number 22, corneas, completed. Patient number 23, heart, match found. I felt bile rise in my throat. The clipboards weren't for treatment, they were order forms. Then I heard it. A voice. Dry, barely a whisper. Hey. Hey. I turned, heart jumping into my throat. A girl, no older than 20, was lying on a cot near the back. Her eyes were half open, her skin ashen. She had curly hair matted with sweat and a long scar trailing down her abdominal, still red. "You're awake," I said, rushing to her side. She nodded faintly. They took my kidney, I think. I was at a clinic for a checkup, then I woke up here. "What's your name?" I asked, scanning for IV lines. "May," she whispered. "I don't want to die here." "Neither do I." I looked around. There had to be cameras, but I didn't care anymore. I found a cart with linens and began tearing strips from a blanket to make bandages. May's hands were cold, but she squeezed mine back when I touched her. She was still fighting. "I'm getting you out," I promised. I spotted a clipboard hanging near the far wall. Curious, I grabbed it and froze. It was a master list. I ran my finger down the names, each followed by an ID, an organ code, and a schedule. Number 1, Yan Lu, liver, extracted. Number 2, Aria Reyes, heart, scheduled. Number 3, May Carter, kidney, extracted. Number 4, Alan Thomas, lungs, pending. My name. I wasn't crazy. This was real. I didn't remember how I got here. I didn't know who brought me or why, but seeing my name printed coldly next to the word heart, it lit something inside me. Not fear, rage. I shoved the clipboard under my gown and returned to May, who was trying to sit up. "You won't make it far," she murmured. "They patrol. I'll find a way, but we can't wait long." I slipped her arm over my shoulder, and together we inched toward the stairwell. Her feet dragged, but moved. Every few steps I paused to check behind us. No one. We reached the stairs. I helped her sit, breathless and shaking. That's when the hallway light snapped on. Someone had triggered the motion sensors. They knew. I didn't think. I hauled May up, dragging her as fast as my legs could go. She whimpered with every step, and I prayed whoever was behind that light hadn't reached the stairwell yet. We emerged on the next floor. It looked like storage, crates, biohazard bins, rusted wheelchairs. We ducked behind a tall stack of cardboard boxes just as footsteps echoed down the corridor. 2 men, dressed in white scrubs, walked past. One was holding a tablet. "Prep for emergency surgery. The donor's loose, but the recipient's heart rate is spiking. We can't delay." Security swept the 3rd floor. "She's not there." They kept walking. Donor. That was me. I waited until the footsteps faded. Then I turned to May. "We go now." We moved, staying low, slipping past carts and debris. At one point, a rat scurried across our path, and May nearly screamed. I clamped my hand over her mouth and whispered, "Just a little more. Then we're out." I didn't know if that was true. At the far end of the corridor, I found a locked maintenance door with a faded red lever. I yanked it. Nothing. A keycard scanner blinked red. Damn. I remembered the doctor from earlier. He had a badge. If I could just... A creak behind us. We turned. A man stood at the hallway entrance holding a stun baton. "There you are," he said, stepping closer. "Back to surgery. Now." I stood up, shielding May. "Don't touch her," I said. "You should be unconscious," he almost amused, "but I guess adrenaline works wonders." He lunged. I grabbed a bundle tray from a shelf and hurled it. It slammed into his shoulder and he stumbled. I darted forward, ramming my elbow into his jaw. The baton clattered to the floor. May crawled toward it and tossed it to me. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button. A loud crack of electricity, a scream, and then he collapsed, twitching. I grabbed his key card and ran to the door. It opened. Wind, fresh air, the scent of oil, night, and freedom. Beyond the door was a narrow alley. I could see stars. I turned back for May. She was crying. "I told you, we're not dying here." I had questions, so many, but those would wait. Because right now, the only thing that mattered was this. I could have left May behind, but if I had, who would save the others?
I thought I was a victim, but it seems I was the one who chose death. The problem is, I don't remember when I made that choice. The lights flickered as May and I slipped into what looked like an old administrative office. We had been running for what felt like forever, our feet bare, our hands bruised from clawing at walls and metal doors, lungs on fire. I could still hear the echo of boots somewhere above us, hunting, methodical. Inside the room, dust blanketed every surface. Filing cabinets lined the walls like silent witnesses. Everything smelled of rust, chemicals, and time. My heart hadn't stopped racing since we escaped the basement. I could still see the eyes of the unconscious patients, dozens of them, numbered, sedated, breathing faintly. Human inventory. Some younger than me, some barely teens. May collapsed onto a torn office chair and wheezed. I turned on a small desk lamp, risking the light because I needed answers. I opened the nearest drawer and dozens of files spilled out. Medical reports, test results, charts, all sorted by code names, patient numbers. But then, one folder stopped me cold. Aria Reyes. That name again. My name. My throat tightened. I sat down and flipped it open. Inside, everything was about me. Blood type, O positive. Tissue compatibility, exceptional. Neural scans, heart imaging, complete psychological profile. But what froze me was the last document. A signed consent form. A voluntary organ donation agreement. My name scrawled in pen. My fingerprint stamped beside it. I touched the signature. My own, yet foreign. The date listed was 3 weeks from now. But today? Today wasn't even close to that date. I stared at the form until the letters bled together. May noticed my expression. "What is it?" she whispered. I handed it to her. "They say I agreed to this." She frowned. "You're saying you signed up to have your heart removed?" "I guess," I croaked. "But not today. I signed it for 3 weeks from now. Why are they doing this now?" May flipped the page. There, written in sharp ink under the official form, was a handwritten note. "Advance the procedure. Buyer can't wait." My stomach turned. So, someone paid extra to move the schedule forward, and to make it easier, they erased my memory? I shook my head. None of this makes sense. But suddenly, it did. Too much of it did. Flashes hit me like lightning. A hospital bed, a girl hooked up to machines, a doctor's voice. "She doesn't have long." My own voice. "Take mine, if you have to. She's my sister." I gasped. I staggered back from the desk. I have a sister. Her name is Mia. I scrambled through the file, desperate until I found a photo, blurred, medical. A teenage girl with dark hair, frail, unconscious, pale skin clinging to bone. Mia. My mind surged with fragments now. Childhood laughter, shared birthdays, singing in the rain, and the last memory, her faint voice. "I'm scared, Aria." I had made the choice. I had signed my own death sentence for her. But this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. "Why would they erase your memory?" May asked, stunned. "Because they wanted me silent, obedient, no screaming, no hesitation. If I didn't remember why I signed, I wouldn't resist when they strapped me down." "And the buyer?" she asked. "The one who pushed up the schedule?" I clenched my jaw. Whoever they are, they didn't care about Mia. They just wanted my heart, fast. We sat in silence, the fluorescent light buzzing above us like a warning. I felt sick, not just from the truth, but from the realization that in this moment, I didn't know if Mia was even alive. I rummaged through the cabinet again, searching for her name. "Mia Reyes," I muttered. At last, I found it. Another folder, fewer pages. One note stood out. "Patient unresponsive. A waiting heart. Location, room 701. Top floor, I said out loud. May looked terrified. You want to go back up? I need to know if she's okay. I need to see her. You could be caught. I've already been caught once. I just didn't realize it. We packed the files and destroyed the rest. I kept mine, proof of who I was, what had been done to me. The journey back up was tense. We avoided cameras, ducked behind carts, froze at every noise. I felt every beat of my heart like it could be the last. One hallway, then another, an elevator chimed nearby. We used the stairs. The 7th floor was colder, cleaner, newer. The walls smelled like antiseptic, but the silence was heavier. Room 701 stood alone at the end of a hallway. I pushed the door open quietly. There she was, Mia. Alive, unconscious, hooked up to IVs and monitors. Her chest barely moved. I rushed to her side. Her face was thinner than I remembered. Dark circles hollowed her eyes, but she was there. I took her hand. I remember you now, I whispered. I came back for you. Her fingers twitched. I wasn't sure if it was real or imagined, but I clung to it. She needs surgery soon, May said. But they're going to use you, against your will. I looked at Mia's monitor. Stable for now, but time was slipping. That night, May and I hid in the janitor's closet, eating scraps and whispering plans. I can't leave her, I said. I know, May replied, but you can't die for her like this. Not when it's rushed, not when it's a transaction. I gripped the folder tight. I needed to know more. I needed to find the buyer. I needed to know why my memory had been taken, because something about all this still felt off. In the morning, alarms sounded across the lower floors. Someone had discovered the mess we left. The hunt had resumed, but this time, I wasn't running just to survive. I was running to remember everything they'd stolen from me, and to take back what little time I had left. I sold my life, but for who? And what did they take from me before I even got to say goodbye?
They say nightmares end when you wake up, but some begin the moment your eyes open. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting an artificial glow across the sterile walls. I pressed my back to the cold tile, gripping the small scalpel I had taken from the surgical tray earlier. My hand was trembling, not from weakness, but from the suffocating weight of uncertainty. Every step forward felt like peeling away a layer of myself I no longer recognized. May crouched beside me, eyes wide, jaw clenched. Her breathing had grown shallow, erratic, like a bird caught in a storm. We can't leave them like this, I whispered, peeking back into the room filled with unconscious patients. We have to try. We had made it this far, through the operating room, through locked halls and lies dressed as care, and now we were here, on the cusp of something that looked like freedom, if only we could drag it out from under the weight of sedatives and secrets. May didn't reply, but she didn't stop me either. That was enough. I returned to the edge of the room, where row after row of metal-framed beds lined the walls like hospital cots for soldiers after a war no one remembered fighting. I reached the nearest patient, a young woman, maybe my age, with IV tubes taped to her skin, and a vacant expression locked beneath fluttering lids. I shook her gently. Hey, can you hear me? No response. I leaned closer. You have to wake up! They're going to take your heart, your lungs, everything. You're not safe here. She stirred. Her eyes flicked open. For a moment, I thought I saw recognition, a flicker of hope, then stillness. Her gaze passed me through, cold and void, like she was searching the air for instructions I couldn't hear. Her lips moved, a whisper, mechanical and wrong. "Do not leave the perimeter. Orders must be followed." What? I stepped back. She sat up slowly, not groggy, not confused, just precise, like a doll set on a track. "Orders must be followed." Another patient stirred, a tall man with bruised arms and a stitched chest. He opened his eyes and muttered the same line. "Orders must be followed." And then chaos. He lunged. I barely moved in time, his fists slamming into the bed frame where my head had been. I scrambled backwards, dragging May with me as more patients began to rise. Not all, but enough to matter, enough to kill. "They're programmed," I gasped. "They're not just sedated. They've been wired or drugged, conditioned." May cried out as a woman grabbed at her wrist, nails digging in. I swung the scalpel, slicing shallowly across the attacker's forearm. She didn't scream, didn't bleed. She just paused and then turned her head toward me like I was the new objective. "We have to go," May shouted, kicking the woman away. I nodded. No more trying to be a savior. The door slammed shut behind us as we stumbled into the corridor. I shoved a metal cart against the frame. It wouldn't hold forever, but maybe it would buy us seconds. Seconds were gold now. We sprinted down the hallway, past the flickering exit signs and peeling paint. I could hear footsteps behind us, bare feet slapping against linoleum. Not fast, but steady, purposeful. "They're not just patients," I said between breaths. "They're guards, human traps." "I thought this place couldn't get worse," May muttered. "Guess I was wrong." We ducked into a control room, a small glass enclosure filled with monitors, wiring, and old coffee cups. I slammed the door behind us and locked it, praying it would hold. Inside, the room hummed with technology. Live camera feeds showed every hallway, every surgical chamber, every bed. My breath caught in my throat as I watched a doctor walk past one of the screens, calm, clipboard in hand, completely unaware that his horror show was unraveling. "Look," May pointed at the terminal. "That folder. Operations log." I slid into the chair, clicking fast, bypassing passwords with a guess that shouldn't have worked but did. 39 ARIA. And there it was. Maps, blueprints, schedules, patient records, supply requests, drug logs, and a file titled Neural Reprogramming Protocols, Alpha Batch. My hands shook as I opened it. Charts, doses, psychological response patterns, names, numbers, notes. They had been using patients as both product and security, a closed loop. No cameras in the underground ward because the guards were human. "They're turning people into gatekeepers, living locks," I whispered. May was pale. "Why not just sedate them all?" "Because sedatives wear off, but fear, obedience, you can rewire that." I scrolled further until a diagram caught my eye, a layout of the facility. Sublevels, exits, restricted zones. I downloaded it. A small USB drive stuck out of the console, probably forgotten. I yanked it free and pocketed it. It felt like holding a compass in a hurricane. Then, a beep. A red dot blinked on the screen. A motion sensor in the hallway. Too close. "They're here." I grabbed May's hand and bolted through the side door, the hallway beyond branching into darkness. Alarms hadn't sounded yet, but they would. They always did. We followed the map in my head. Left, right, down. A ladder led to a maintenance shaft. I climbed first, the metal cold and slick. May followed, gritting her teeth with each rung. At the top was a hatch. I pushed. It didn't budge. Below us, the sound of something scraping metal echoed up the shaft. I pushed again, harder. It clicked. We burst into a dimly lit hallway lined with filing cabinets and peeling wallpaper. Old, forgotten, but empty. I slammed the hatch shut and jammed a chair under it. We stood in silence, gasping, covered in sweat, eyes wild. I can't take much more of this," May whispered. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I could either. But I looked at the USB in my hand, then at the hallway ahead. I have the map now. We know where the exits are. We just have to move fast. May swallowed hard. "And if they find us again?" I looked at her. "Then we don't run this time."
In my world now, the only person not holding a knife is the one who once held it. They were everywhere. Footsteps echoed behind every metal door, shouts bouncing off the sterile walls. My lungs burned, my legs trembling with every step. May clung to me, limping. Blood oozed from a gash on her arm where one of the programmed patients had caught her. We didn't have much time. I could feel it tightening around us like a noose. We turned a corner and hit a dead end. A steel wall, no handles, no keypad, just nothing. May looked up at me, her breath short and sharp. We're trapped. I looked back, my fingers tightening around the USB stick I'd grabbed from the control room. The map. I had stared at it for mere seconds, but now I tried to remember. A hidden passage, somewhere behind panel C14. Was this it? I pressed my palm against the wall. Nothing. Then, a click. The wall shifted. A sliver opened. Hands reached out. Not to grab, but to pull. Before I could scream, we were yanked into the darkness. The walls sealed behind us. Silence. A dim red light flickered to life, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with rusted pipes and exposed wiring. The man standing before us wasn't wearing scrubs or a guard's uniform, just an old coat, stained with dust and time. He wasn't young. Deep lines scored his face, and a thin scar curved beneath his eye. But his hands were steady, his eyes sharper than any scalpel. "Don't scream." I didn't. May, ever braver than she looked, stepped in front of me. "Who are you?" "I'm the reason you're still alive." He turned, motioning for us to follow. We hesitated, but there was nowhere else to go. We walked for what felt like forever, our footsteps muffled by the thick concrete. Finally, we entered a small chamber lit by a portable lamp and covered in documents, screens, and surgical photos that turned my stomach. The man sat down, took a long breath, and looked straight at me. "You're Aria Reyes. I've been waiting for you." My throat tightened. "How do you know who I am?" He leaned forward. "Because I used to run this place." He told us his name was Julian Merrick. A decade ago, he had been the lead surgeon at Helix Med's original transplant center. Back then, he believed in the mission: high-risk organ transplants, life extension research, ethical progress. Until his wife, a nurse named Leanne, went missing after a routine shift. Her heart was found in a VIP recipient 3 days later. "Helix Med changed after that," he said, voice hollow. "They stopped looking for willing donors. They started manufacturing them." I stared at him, frozen. "So they fake everything?" He sighed. "They use forged paperwork, erased memories, staged accidents, like yours." He pointed to my arm. "That ID band wasn't made for hospitals. It was made for warehouses." He pulled out a black USB drive and slid it across the table toward me. "This contains everything: patient lists, transaction records, surgical logs, and one more thing." He turned his screen toward me. Names, hundreds of them. Next to each name, a corresponding price. Heart, kidney, liver, eyes. I scrolled until I saw it. Reyes, Aria, Heart. Priority transfer. Clearance code Helix C12. Buyer. Confidential. Tier 1 VIP. Status. In progress. I almost dropped the drive. He turned off the screen. I was trying to shut them down from the inside until they found out. May's voice was barely above a whisper. Then why save us now? Dr. Merrick looked at us, something shifting behind his eyes. Because I couldn't save Leanne, but I can help you destroy the people who took her. He explained everything in a slow, meticulous voice, like he'd gone over the words in his head 1,000 times. Helix Med was publicly known for cutting-edge transplant science, but privately it was a global network, harvesting organs, selling them to the highest bidders, and using volunteers whose memories were erased or fabricated. Many of them had signed forms under false pretenses, like I did. And the man who bought your heart, he said, looking at me, he's already inside the building, top floor. Name's Victor Hallstrom, oil tycoon, dying of heart failure. He paid 7 figures to skip the donor list. My stomach turned. I thought of that glass room, the surgical prep, the voice, the buyer is ready. It was never about helping people. It was always a transaction. I want to stop them, but I don't know how. Dr. Merrick handed me a tablet. Take this USB and get out. There's an access tunnel that leads outside the Helix compound. Once you're out, go to the nearest city, find a journalist, someone with reach. Leak this. May's hands were shaking. What about me? He paused. You can't leave. What? He turned to her, regret pooling in his eyes. Your photo's been flagged in their security system. You were processed 2 days ago. Your image is in every scanner. If you leave, they'll catch you before you get a block away. She stood there in silence, eyes filling. I took a step forward. Then we'll wait. We'll find a way. No, she said suddenly. You need to go. What? She smiled, trembling. You're the one they want. You're the one who can expose them. I'll slow you down. May! She took my hands. Don't let my life be the reason others die. I didn't sleep that night. Dr. Merrick showed me the route, through a shaft, beneath the Morgan, out into the abandoned rail corridor. He marked places on the map where surveillance might be disabled for brief windows. May curled up on a cot, watching us, silent. The world had burned down, and I was standing in its ashes. As dawn crept in through the vents, Dr. Merrick pressed the USB into my palm. Hide it under your skin if you have to. I nodded, unable to speak. May stood by the exit, her arms crossed, pretending to be brave. I'll see you again, I said, hoping it wasn't a lie. She nodded. Yeah, when this is over. Dr. Merrick looked at me one last time. You won't be safe. They'll come for you. Victor Hallstrom isn't just a dying man. He's a man who thinks he owns you. I clenched my fist. Then let him try. They won't let you live long. We weren't just running. We had declared war. I saw the light again. The same overhead lamp. Cold, unblinking, merciless. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I was angry. My wrists were bound, my limbs numb from the sedative coursing through me. I couldn't move, yet my mind screamed louder than ever. The chill of the steel table beneath me bit into my spine, but it was nothing compared to the fire I felt in my chest. So this is how it ends again? Sedated, strapped down, heart sold off to the highest bidder? No, not this time. I blinked hard, willing the haze to lift. My thoughts swam heavy and thick, but I held on to one image.
the bloodied hand of the doctor who saved me. His face twisted in urgency as he passed me the USB, his voice cracking as he whispered, "Run, expose them." That mission was still mine. I hadn't come this far just to be carved open like meat. A beep echoed near my ear. Then another. They were monitoring my vitals. Outside the room, I could hear the soft shuffle of shoes on the linoleum, hushed voices speaking in clinical tones, the calm before a crime. I caught fragments. Dosage adjusted. Schedule remains unchanged. Final extraction, then disposal. My body betrayed me. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I could only listen, while my death was scheduled like a routine procedure. My name was still Aria Reyes. I was not a patient, I was not a donor. I was a prisoner of Helix Med. And somehow, I would make them remember me. The door hissed open. A nurse entered first, followed by 2 masked surgeons. Their eyes didn't linger on me. I was just the next item on their list. One checked the monitors, while another read from a clipboard. Vitals holding. No muscle activity. Proceed. The nurse leaned in, preparing the IV with another dose. I could see the syringe. Clear fluid, nearly full. No, I wasn't going under again. I summoned everything I had left, every ounce of willpower not yet stolen by drugs. My fingers twitched, just a little, enough to feel the leather strap digging into my skin. The moment the nurse turned her back to check the machine, I shifted my wrist, a jolt of pain. Another twitch. A shadow blocked the light. Then, chaos. The door slammed open, and a body hurled into the room with an animal cry. It was him, the doctor who saved me. His coat was streaked with blood, some fresh, some dried. His eyes were wild, hands trembling. In one fist, a scalpel. In the other, a stolen ID badge. "Get away from her," he roared, lunging toward the nurse. The syringe fell to the floor. I heard a scream. A scalpel clattered. Then, gunfire. The sound split the air like lightning. Sharp. Deafening. Final. The doctor dropped. He hit the floor beside me, his chest heaving, blood pooling from a wound in his side. I turned my head, sluggish, eyes burning. "No!" I croaked. "No! No!" He looked up at me, lips twitching, trying to say something. He reached for the strap on my wrist, bloody fingers fumbling with the buckle. Then, another shot. His body went still. I didn't have time to mourn. The guard who fired stepped forward, raising his weapon again. His finger tightened on the trigger. And then, darkness. I don't know how I did it. I don't even remember the motion. All I know is I ripped my wrist free, slammed the metal tray beside me into the surgical light, and everything went dark. The bulb shattered. Sparks flew. A blaring alarm erupted as backup generators kicked in, bathing the room in red warning light. I rolled off the table, knees buckling, body screaming. I hit the floor hard, half on top of the doctor's body. His blood soaked my sleeve. The guard shouted something. I didn't listen. I ran. The hallways were red. Every corridor pulsed like an artery. Sirens echoed. Voices yelled commands I couldn't make out, but I knew the layout now. I had memorized the map on the USB. I knew where the auxiliary exit was, down 2 levels, past the incinerator wing.
I limped toward it, holding the USB in my fist so tight it dug into my palm. Every footstep was a war against gravity, against pain, against the sedation still dulling my brain. Somewhere, May was waiting for word that I made it out. Somewhere, my sister still didn't know I was alive. Somewhere, the buyers, those billionaires who shopped for organs like wine, still believed I was on the table. Let them believe. Let them panic when the operation fails. Let them fear what comes next. I made it to the exit corridor. 2 guards, both armed. I had nothing but a scalpel and a body soaked in another man's blood. But adrenaline doesn't care about odds. I waited until one turned, then I ran. Not away, at them. The scalpel cut flesh. The butt of a rifle hit my ribs. I screamed. They fired, missed. I slammed into the emergency panel. An alarm went off. Fire doors opened. Smoke filled the air. A security protocol I hadn't even planned for. Thank God for system chaos. I crawled under the gate as it slammed shut behind me. One more hallway, a ladder, then a hatch. I threw it open, and the night swallowed me. The cold outside slapped me awake. Stars. Real stars. Not LED lights, not false ceilings. The sky was real. I collapsed onto the dirt, chest heaving. Somewhere behind me, sirens still blared. But I was outside. I was free. For now. I didn't stop running until I reached a road. Then I collapsed in the ditch and vomited blood, fear, grief. All of it. When I finally looked up, the USB was still in my hand. Sticky with blood. Smudged with sweat. Inside it were names, proof, coordinates, financial trails, emails, video logs, everything Helix Med had buried. I could vanish now, hide, run to another country, or I could make them pay. I looked up at the stars again, and I remembered what the doctor told me. Truth doesn't need a heartbeat, just someone brave enough to carry it. I still had a heartbeat. So I ran again. This time, not to escape. This time, to begin the war. I ran not for survival, but for vengeance, for proof, for justice. And this time, I wasn't just carrying my own life. I was carrying the truth.
I woke up in a bed that didn't smell like bleach. The light above me wasn't blinding. It was soft, warm. A nurse smiled at me as if I were human, not a numbered specimen. Machines beeped gently beside me. Everything was sterile, quiet, kind. But I couldn't smile back. Not because I was in pain, but because something inside me felt missing. I blinked, and for a long time, I just watched the dust float through the sunlight. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I barely moved. The nurse asked if I needed water. I nodded. When she returned, she said, "You've been asleep for 2 days. You're safe now." Safe. I turned that word around in my head like a coin. What did it mean anymore? Safe didn't mean untouched. It didn't mean unchanged. I had crossed through a place where life was measured in dollars and silence, where screams were sedated and hearts were priced like antiques.
I had left a part of myself on that operating table, maybe literally. And yet, here I was, alive, awake, still breathing. My hand brushed against the inner part of my wrist. The plastic band was gone, but the imprint of Area Reyes, Patient 39, still burned beneath the skin. They told me the truth had already begun to unravel. The USB I carried made it out. A nurse in a civilian hospital in Utah received an anonymous envelope with no return address, just the word, "Break this," written in thick red Sharpie. Inside was the USB, still warm from my pocket. It contained everything: footage, lists, signed waivers, chat logs, voice memos, and names. Names of buyers, names of patients, names of doctors, names of people who had smiled during interviews while funding human butchery in hidden basements. The press exploded. Headlines filled screens. Organ harvest facility exposed. Billionaire receives illegally acquired heart. Whistleblower data sparks nationwide medical probe. And above all else, one name kept coming up: Area Reyes. Me. The FBI arrived within hours of my identification. A female agent sat beside my bed and handed me a legal pad. "This is your story. Write it." It sounded simple, but what she was asking was not. They let me recover first. I spent 6 more days in that room, learning how to eat without shaking, to walk without hearing alarm bells. May was safe. She had sent a message through the agency. She was under federal protection, relocated to a safe house. The doctor who saved us hadn't made it. Shot in the back. Died before anyone could reach him. His blood had soaked into my sleeve. I had worn it until the nurses took it off me. One night, I sat in front of a laptop in a guest room assigned by the Department of Justice. My fingers hovered over the keys. I thought about how to begin. There were so many ways. I was almost killed. I signed my own death sentence. I woke up on a table where they were about to take my heart. None of it seemed enough. None of it carried the weight. So I typed, "I am Aria Reyes, and I died once. This is what they did to me before I came back." I wrote everything, every detail. From the moment I opened my eyes beneath the surgical lights to the echo of boots chasing me through hallways, I wrote about May's whisper, about the blood on the floor, about the hidden room filled with sedated people whose families would never find them. I wrote about how my memory had been stolen, my identity twisted into a commodity, and how I had willingly signed the form out of love, out of desperation, and how that love had been turned into a transaction. I wrote about the hands that tried to kill me, and the hands that untied me, and the hands that are no longer alive to hold mine. The story was published 2 weeks later on every major international news site. Second Heart, Aria Reyes exposes global organ trafficking ring. My face was blurred for privacy, but not for long. I chose to make it public. I didn't want anonymity anymore. I wanted them to know exactly who lived and exactly who would speak. Helix Med's headquarters were raided. The founder fled, last seen boarding a jet to a country without extradition laws. The billionaire who bought my heart, a man named Julian Kane, was indicted. He claimed he had no idea the donation was non-consensual. His lawyer said he was dying, that he had paid for a life-saving transplant. I didn't care. "I hope you live long enough to stand trial," I told the cameras. His face didn't flinch. Mine did. For weeks, I couldn't sleep without dreaming of surgical lasks and cold hands. I walked through the world like a cracked vase, smiling through fractures. But slowly, I began to breathe again. I started therapy, took walks, drank tea instead of staring at ceilings. May called once a week, her voice always a little braver than the last time. She had enrolled in nursing school. She said she wanted to help people the right way. "I don't want revenge," she told me. "I want repair." One evening, a journalist asked if I had any regrets. I looked at the sky before I answered. "I regret not waking up sooner." She didn't understand what I meant, but I did. I am not who I was. The Aria Reyes who walked into that clinic, hopeful, selfless, perhaps naive, is gone. She died on that table the first time. What rose afterward was something new, not just a survivor, not a victim, but a witness. A mirror held up to a world that has become too good at hiding its rot. I have another heart now, not physically, but metaphorically. A second heart. A heart that beats louder, with fury and purpose. A heart that does not forget. I'm no longer the old Arya, but I am still alive, and I will speak until the world hears every word. And remember, the heart is just a muscle until someone decides it's worth $500,000. This was Second Heart. Would you fight back if your heart was no longer yours? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Would you fight back if your body was no longer yours? Tell us below.